Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 126, Free Training. The Assessment Island. Core Area. Because he evolved from a walking expert to a riding expert, Su Hao didn't take much time to reach the center from the edge. There were clearly a lot more intermediate and advanced entry-level sprites here, who were also threats to him. After all, sprites weren't stupid. They knew how to sneak attack and team up. They also knew how to prioritize attacking the sprite trainers who were the weakest in the group. Puff! A huge fireball flew towards him. Without needing Su Hao's instructions, the water unicorn beast dodged with a neigh. The hot fireball flew past and hit an electric pole at the back, exploding into a ball of bright flames with sparks flying everywhere. Fortunately, I have a mount. There was no mount. With his reflexes and speed, he could at most roll around like a donkey. It dodged the frontal explosion. But he couldn't avoid the aftershock. It would definitely consume a bit of soul power. As the saying goes, many little drops make an ocean. These consumptions could accumulate to cause danger easily. Or they could only let their sprites stand in front. The meat shield sprites often didn't protect those fragile sprites, but rather the more fragile sprite trainers. The sprite that blasted out a fireball was a flaming pig. It wasn't stupid. He wanted to use the method of besieging the enemy to force Flaming Cloud Crow and Reverie Butterfly to retreat, giving itself more time to escape. But it failed. He only saw two pairs of angry eyes. Howl! Wails spread far and wide, scaring away the other nearby sprites. A flaming pig was lying flat in the pit. Smoke was coming out from its body. Su Hao vaguely smelled the fragrance of roasted pigs. Gulp! The other wild sprites observing in secret escaped even faster. Reverie Butterfly flew back. Suddenly, it seemed to have discovered something and hurriedly shouted, "Gurgle, gurgle!" The water unicorn beast's body moved before its brain could react, thanks to the daily training it had received. It raised its hooves and dashed forward as fast as it could. The next moment, a tall and sturdy grey figure descended from the sky and punched the place where the water unicorn beast was originally standing. The ground cracked inch by inch. The cracks were like spider webs, densely packed. Then, it suddenly shattered. Countless gravel flew out, like stray bullets. A few of them whooshed towards him, but were blocked by a huge translucent bubble. The bubble dented slightly, then bounced the gravel out again. Water unicorn beast's unique skill, bubble defense. Su Hao looked back. It was a mountain-moving ape. Elite level sprite. Cunning ape. It rushed out of a building nearby. Looks like I have to avoid entering areas with complicated terrain as much as possible. He felt that he had learned something again. The mountain-moving ape landed on the ground and stretched out its fan-sized palm, grabbing at the tiny Reverie Butterfly. Reverie Butterfly dodged slightly and threw out two energy balls at the same time. The one that was hurled towards the mountain-moving ape's face was blocked by its raised palm. The other hit its chest. Amidst the rumbling, the aftershock swept out in all directions, stirring up strong winds. Even though the mountain-moving ape wasn't seriously injured, it still staggered a few steps back due to the impact. At this moment, the Flaming Cloud Crow was not civil with it, taking the opportunity to display its unique skill. Its black wings became as shiny as metal. Waves of red light spread out again. The final black feather spread out, its wings extended and turned sharp like blades. Steel wings and flaming feathers and wing attack. Flaming blade slash. It slashed onto the mountain-moving ape's right leg. Its thick hair was cut open, and the flaming blade sank a third of its way into the thick thigh before it was washed away by the wild spiritual force in the mountain-moving ape's body, causing it to lose its remaining strength and was dislodged there. The mountain-moving ape roared. Its huge fist was covered in a yellowish-brown glow. Charging fist. Before the fist even landed, it produced a gush of wind that was strong enough to pierce through the wall. But Flaming Cloud Crow was familiar with the battle style of retreating with one hit. When the flaming blade was stuck, the black feathers that were spread out by the wing's attack shattered with a bang, turning into the purest spiritual force particles. This was called Flaming Crow Broken Feather. It had already flown far away. The impact punch landed, lifting up the already cracked ground, sending gravel flying everywhere, as dense as raindrops. But the two sprites dodged with ease. While dodging, Reverie Butterfly still had the energy to throw out energy balls one after another. The Flaming Cloud Crow took advantage of the opportunity and stabbed the mountain-moving ape secretly. All aimed at its fatal areas. 2 minutes later, the injured and panting mountain-moving ape fell heavily to the ground. It only consumed 2 sprites' mid-level spiritual force. They were far from using their trump cards. The battle was about to end. The abandoned streets had already been destroyed beyond recognition by the shock waves of the battle. The water unicorn beast leaped and leaped, dodging the deep pits created by the mountain-moving ape as it approached forward. Elite-level destructive power is really. Su Hao found it very difficult to imagine what it would be like for extraordinary-level sprites and monarch-level sprites to fight at full force. At 3 in the afternoon. In a vast farm that did not seem to have any obstacles, Su Hao counted the spoils of war badges. The 3 sprites ate jade powder to replenish their spiritual forces. There are 3 elite level, 22 advanced level, 36 intermediate level, and primary level. There's no need to count them anymore. In the combat test, 1 advanced level was equivalent to 5 intermediate level, which was equivalent to 25 primary level badge. And defeating an advanced entry-level sprite was clearly easier than defeating 25 entry-level beginner sprites. The difference between that and elite levels was even greater. 1 was equivalent to 25 advanced level badges. With these badges, I'm pretty much number 1. The combat test was graded according to the ranking. The first 60% was the passing mark. The first place was full marks. Su Hao had read the data of the Back Tower Dragon and the Cry Lightning Winged Dragon. All of them were at the entry-level limit, and they had a lot of unique skills. The panel was an enhanced version of entry-level power. They also have the ability to defeat wild elites, but will definitely lose to mine. Gurgle. Reverie Butterfly nodded. So, can I rest now, Ku? It was very energetic. Who told you to only drop badges and not money when killing monsters, Gurgle? So, you can start training now. Reverie Butterfly. The Flaming Cloud Crow made a squawk in agreement. Seeing the question marks in the eyes of the 3 sprites, Su Hao said earnestly. Think about it, when were there such good sparring partners in the past who could allow you to experiment unique skills without any qualms? For example, illusion. He looked at Reverie Butterfly. Regardless of whether it's 5 senses control or illusion sound, you can experiment with it at any time. You can do whatever you want, there's no need to worry about making the experiment subject retarded. Another example, saber techniques. He looked at the Flaming Cloud Crow and said, now, there's a chance for you to fully experience the feeling of the saber slashing at different body parts, so that you can better figure out the sure kill saber art. Finally, he looked at the water unicorn beast. Under the water unicorn beast's expectant gaze, it said, you, forget it. Be a good mount. Water unicorn beast. It looked at the 2 seniors, Butterfly and Crow. Reverie Butterfly was still doubtful. The Flaming Cloud Crow was already flapping its wings, eager to try. The water unicorn beast fell silent. It expressed its grievance. But he didn't dare to say it. On the island, the battle was still ongoing. Candidates who lacked battle experience and poor adaptability were in a sorry state. Only a few battles later, the sprites were already injured, with their battle powers decreasing consistently. Those with poorer luck and insufficient abilities were surrounded by wild sprites. They couldn't escape, and their lives were in danger. They could only helplessly press the emergency button and choose to leave. But there were also some who constantly searched for wild sprites to kill, their smiles gradually growing wider. Bay Town. Old Chen and the other teachers from the various schools were sitting in the hall, watching the surveillance footage. The TV station also chose suitable footages from those transmitted to them by the examination hall to be broadcasted. At this moment, in the command center, there were much fewer people now, but there were still a few big shots, Heavenly King Yan included, overseeing the whole examination hall. As they watched the battles of those high school students, they couldn't help but recall the past. Thinking back, when we first participated in combat with sprites, we were also the same age as them. Our performance may not necessarily be better than the young people now. Shoo, shoo. Old Wu, you are the one who didn't perform well. I've never panicked in battles. Heavenly King Yan, Xia Yang Hua, smiled. The tall and thin man called Old Wu snorted coldly. This forced the other big shots to look up at the ceiling and pretend that they didn't hear anything. Suddenly, Heavenly King Yan made a sound of surprise and immediately instructed the staff members sitting in front of the computer, zoom in on the image on A34. Chapter 127, The Ambush Team Attacks. Old Xia, what's wrong? Is there something wrong? The immediate reaction of the Heavenly King Wu was expecting that a terrorist had appeared, causing him to get excited all of a sudden. He turned to look. Then, Heavenly King Yan said, No, I just noticed a very interesting candidate. When the other big shots heard this, they also looked over. Image A34 was placed on the command center's main screen. From the looks of it, footage taken from the drone from a high altitude. It wasn't very clear, but the big shots present could still see it clearly. It was a 10,000 vine turtle. Emerald green vines danced, each dozens of meters long, sweeping around like green pythons. A big tree was broken at the trunk, and huge rocks were smashed into pieces. Dust flew everywhere. Amidst the huge net made of countless vines, a small figure was dancing. Some big shot's eyes lit up. This leisurely dodging posture. He then saw a candidate riding a mount and a sprite flying in the distance. None of them interfered in the battle. The big boss understood. Is he training his sprites? Interesting, this candidate. Everyone else is fighting hard to get points, but he treats wild sprites as sparring partners. It's more than that. Heavenly King Yan, Xia Yang Hua said. He stared at the screen and discovered traces of incongruity from the 10,000 vine turtle's actions. This reverie butterfly is casting an illusion under the attack of the storm. And it even succeeded. With entry-level strength, it successfully hypnotized an elite-level sprite. Not easy. Not long after, the vines waved by the 10,000 vine turtle gradually started flinching. Its cumbersome body also moved outwards step by step. It was as though it was chasing after a certain target. It whipped its vines, but only hit the air. Instead, it released Reverie Butterfly from its vines. The Heavenly King Wu was also amazed. No matter how you look at it, this Reverie Butterfly is very powerful. Toying with an elite level 10,000 vine turtle in the palm of its hand. Is it really just entry level? Old Xia, which family is he from? Which heir from which sect? When the sprite started dancing, I noticed it incorporated extraordinary profound truths of the wind. His name is Su Hao, from an ordinary family background. Heavenly King Wu jerked around, his face filled with shock. Good, that's it. In the distance, Su Hao rode the water unicorn beast. It stood on the roof of a broken building and looked into the distance. He actually couldn't see clearly. The specific battle situation was still broadcasted live by Flaming Cloud Crow. Squawk, squawk. It called. Su Hao nodded slightly. The Reverie Butterfly successfully deviated from the 10,000 vine turtle's perception and caused it to continuously wave its vines at the air. But the little rascal did not do this as easily as it may have seemed. Initially, the Flaming Cloud Crow had helped to buy some time for Reverie Butterfly. It allowed it to plant a seed of illusion. Then, it gradually enlarged the influence of the illusion. Behind, when Reverie Butterfly started to dance in the large net formed by dozens of vines, the 10,000 vine turtle had already begun to be affected. It allowed the little rascal to hypnotize him more easily. Just using the Eye of Nightmare to pull the target into the illusion is quick, but easily detectable. And if I only plant an illusion seed first, and then continuously deepen the influence with dream building and illusion sounds, it would be even more well hidden. Of course, as time passed, the 10,000 vine turtle eventually managed to break free from the illusion. It let out a loud roar. It couldn't find Reverie Butterfly. Each of it seemed to be venting its anger and destroying the surroundings. The noises of destruction were not stopping. Su Hao patted the flaming cloud crow. It's not easy to find an elite-level sparring partner. This 10,000 vine turtle has to be fully utilized. It's your turn now. Flaming cloud crow, X. But the 10,000 vine turtle was going crazy. They rested for the night. The next day, at dawn, Su Hao brought the 3 sprites out of his temporary accommodation. Next, you have to learn group hypnosis. After Reverie Butterfly and Flaming Cloud Crow left, after much effort, they finally attracted 6 advanced entry-level sprites. It was still thanks to Reverie Butterfly's new usage of illusion sound that they could do so. Enraged. Commonly known as attracting hatred. The few advanced entry-level sprites were so angry that they lost their minds, completely unaware of the huge disparity between the two parties. They attacked crazily. Su Hao made the Flaming Cloud Crow retreat. There was space for Reverie Butterfly to perform. Gurgle gurgle. Gurgle gurgle. It had long used the Eye of Nightmare to plant the seed of illusion. Under the improved illusion sound, the expressions of the few sprites who were initially crazily attacking gradually became calm. From anger to sage. They just stood there and didn't attack. Suddenly, a clay monster growled and kept hitting its own head before charging towards Reverie Butterfly. Slash! The clay monster froze and fell to the ground. Flames flashed past. Flaming Cloud Crow retracted its blade. Its extended black feathers didn't completely shatter, only dissipated piece by piece. Most of the spiritual force dispelled were reabsorbed and returned to its body. This was its new comprehension after flame slashing for a day. Not only was it faster to draw and withdraw the saber, its flow was also better controlled. With so many sparring partners whom they didn't need to hold back against, both sprites improved very quickly. The reason why a day's training could last 10 days to half a month was also due to the accumulation of experience previously. Well, Su Hao looked at the water unicorn beast. It had also improved. For example, its running was much more stable. For example, it was faster and had more stamina. Another example was that he could finally signal the water unicorn beast to squat with his eyes. This was a huge improvement. Su Hao was very satisfied. At the center of the island. Abandoned farm. 2 young men in dark brown battle clothes walked out. Candidates have rested here before. He patted the ground wolf beside him and said, "Chase after it. There won't be any problems, right? Howl. It's nearby? Looks like it's going to be fun again." The young man smiled and looked at the other person. It was a sprite trainer with a tyrant bear. "You scared that candidate away just now. It's my turn now, right? All right, I'll be in charge of keeping watch." The members of the surprise attack team on the island came in pairs. It wasn't that they needed to attack together. Typically, one of them would act as the villain to scare the candidates, in order to test their adaptability. The other person would be in charge of managing the situation to prevent accidents from happening. For instance, they chased away other candidates who approached to create a situation of being left alone. The 2 of them chased after him. It was not long before they saw a battle right ahead from afar. A figure on a horse. And 2 sprites that could fly. That was the symbol of a certain candidate. There was no other similar one on the island. Oh my! The sprite trainer of the ground wolf smiled. I finally met someone who's more challenging to play with. Be serious. The other one, who was more steady, said, our goal is to test their level and force out their potential. We need to act appropriately. Going too far is as bad as not enough. Don't worry, brother, the young man said. That candidate is one of the 3 most outstanding candidates. Even if he sees my ground wolf, he may not choose to escape. What a pity, he chuckled. My ground wolf can't be compared to those wild sprites. If you treat it as a wild elite and suffer a loss, don't blame me. They each hid. The other person stepped forward, and the ground wolf made a slight movement before it pounced forward. At this moment, Reverie Butterfly puffed up its cheeks. A shot of energy ball immediately dealt with that very interesting test subject. It was a little unhappy. Su Hao heard its reminder and turned to look. The figure behind the ground wolf showed no intention of hiding. His attire and the graffiti on his battle suit gave him a very intuitive feeling. Not a good person. Su Hao frowned. He patted the water unicorn beast's head. No matter what the situation was, it would be best to hide himself first. Chapter 128, It feels like something's wrong. Don't do anything hastily. Ah, no, being heedless is the priority. The water unicorn beast had already learned to understand his intent, so it retreated a distance away. But not too far away. He had to be wary of other sprites. If he stayed too far away, he would be isolated instead. Yesterday, when the members of the surprise attack team targeted the first candidate, the surveillance video was also sent to Baytown. The candidates on the screen fled in panic. Some teachers sharply noticed that the candidates pressed the button on their wristbands a few times. He asked, the candidate pressed the emergency button. How should this be counted? Normally speaking, asking for help was equivalent to giving up on the assessment. The badges obtained before were still counted, but would be brought out of the examination hall. This way, the earlier the candidates were targeted by the surprise attack team, the more disadvantaged they would be. After all, when candidates encountered elite-level wild sprites, they would mostly find ways to deal with them themselves. However, upon suddenly being attacked by someone, they would more likely to instinctively choose to seek help from the examination hall. It was the same logic as calling the police when they were in danger. The big boss of the examiner's team looked at the candidate on the screen and shook his head slightly. In reality, as long as they calmly and carefully observe, they can also discover the various weak aspects of the members of the surprise attack team. However, the requirements for the assessment aren't that high. When facing members of the surprise attack team, their distress signal will not be dealt with. Therefore, there is no possibility of voluntarily giving up the assessment. The young man in the graffiti battle suit grinned, his sharp gaze looking towards where Su Hao was. His lips moved. Su Hao's current physical condition was already very excellent, and even his vision was very good. He actually really saw what that person was mouthing. Run away. No one will come to rescue. Signal has been blocked. Su Hao was rendered speechless. He looked down at his wristband. It was different from the one from the joint examination. It allowed an active call for help, but it didn't provide a protective shield. This was because the protective shield of the Sprite Trainer wristband was far inferior to the Sprite Trainer's own Sprite commandeering protection, so that kind of equipment couldn't be popularized. But he didn't even think of asking for help in the first place. There are a few strange things. Su Hao pondered. Wild sprites all knew how to launch sneak attacks, but the person wearing the graffiti battle suit in front of them had walked out boldly instead. The ground wolf looked fierce, but its movements were slow. It was clearly telling him that it was giving him time to escape. Besides, it is too weak for an elite-level sprite. It wasn't that he was arrogant and looked down on elite level. He felt that there was still a slight possibility that an extraordinary level sprite had snuck into the island, but it was also very unlikely. But an elite level sprite. It couldn't fly even if it wasn't a water element sprite. It even appeared on the island casually with a sprite trainer, but there was no response from the examination hall. Or there was a mole. Or it was fake. Su Hao was inclined towards the latter. If it was the former, wouldn't it be better to send out an extraordinary level sprite to directly crush the candidates? Why let a mere elite level go? It seemed that the mocking aura exuded by Su Hao was too obvious. The young man had originally wanted to give him 30 seconds to prepare, but he didn't wait anymore. He rushed forward, raising his arm and drew a pistol from his waist. That's right, qualified sprite trainers need to know how to deal with firearms in order to keep up with the times. Bang! He shot at Su Hao. It deliberately missed by a hair. The bullet sank into the ground in front of the water unicorn beast, leaving a hole. Nay! The water unicorn beast tilted its head, took a step back, and leaned forward again. It was asking what this was? At this moment, the second bullet came. The water unicorn beast instinctively used bubble defense. The transparent bubble caved in, and the bullet bounced off, falling to the ground with a clang. The young man nodded slightly. At this point, the ground wolf had already pounced forward. He instructed, "Get through the two sprites and attack the sprite trainer." Howl! As soon as he finished speaking, the ground wolf smashed an energy ball with its paw and used the gravity skill to restrict flaming cloud crow and reverie butterfly. It leaped up and slapped its huge claws at the larger flaming cloud crow. Bang! A psychic shield appeared in front of the flaming cloud crow. It was shattered, and the wolf's claws landed on the metal-like feathers of the flaming cloud crow. It made a crisp sound, like a black metal ball being slapped away. The ground wolf adjusted its posture nimbly in the air and waved its second paw almost right after the first claw was extended. Boom! A claw hit the ground, blowing up dust and smoke all over the sky. The young man's eyes widened. Why was it so troublesome, little wolf? Why did its attack position deviate so much? The ground wolf landed. It leaped forward again. Its target was Su Hao. Suddenly, he staggered. At this moment, the patterns on Reverie Butterfly's wings glowed. Countless granules formed by spiritual force shot out from under its wings and poured down like rain. Like an emerald green rain curtain, it hit the ground wolf's body, directly splitting its skin and flesh. The ground wolf cried out in pain. Its forelimbs exerted force and jumped far away. Granule machine gun bullets hit the ground, giving off popping sounds. A deep ditch was blasted open and the big tree at the end was broken into pieces. And right then, the flaming cloud crow that was sent flying, flew back unharmed. It spread its wings, and a layer of flaming feathers had covered its black feathers, making it look like a phoenix reborn from the flames. What's that? Unique skill, or? The majestic flaming cloud crow swooped down, dragging a long red tail of flames behind it, like a meteor. It charged right at the sandstorm created by the ground wolf. Use the body facade. The flaming cloud crow's power was too strong. The young man didn't dare to let his sprite take it head-on at all. Seeing the fire figure pass through the facade, he heaved a sigh of relief. But the next moment, his eyes widened again. The figure of the flaming cloud crow in his eyes enlarged rapidly. He was being attacked directly. Something is wrong. What the F***ck? Giant Crocodile King, block for me. He suddenly realized that he could only use one sprite. When he regained his senses, he fell down. But it was already too late. The huge impact and flames exploded on the young man's body. His whole being flew out far away and rolled a few times on the ground, wrapped in a light shield like in an eggshell. He was completely stunned. Who am I? Where am I? Who exactly is the candidate? In the distance, the members of the surprise attack team who were guarding the wind were standing on high ground, observing their surroundings with binoculars. He had to see if any other candidates happened to step into this area. After a long while, he looked back. He started running on the roof, leaped a few meters and landed on the roof of another building. I wonder how Xiao Deng is doing. He walked to the other side of the roof and looked over. It was very far away, but he could still clearly distinguish the two parties. One chased, one escaped. There seemed to be something wrong elsewhere on the island. At this moment, the slightly chubby Lu Ren's footsteps were especially vigorous as he ran swiftly through the woods. A blue water frog followed while leaping behind him. After fleeing for an unknown amount of time, Lu Ren only let out a slight sigh of relief when he noticed that there was no more movement behind him. His fingers spread open. He used summon. 2 to 3 seconds later, a somewhat dispirited lava tortoise appeared in front of him. Fortunately. But who exactly is that person? Lu Ren tried to call for reinforcements, but the wristband didn't respond at all. What kind of lousy wristband is this? It's actually blocked. But I'm already far away from that person now. The signal should have recovered, right? He was about to press it. Suddenly, the wristband vibrated, and a message popped up. Lu Ren took a look. It looked like he had grabbed a blade of grass. It's actually a part of the assessment. He vomited blood. He had thought that it was due to his godly manipulation that he had escaped for his life. Lu Ren decided to sit down to take a break. He looked at the sky through the lush leaves, his thoughts drifting away. I wonder how old Sua is doing. If he had encountered a surprise attack team, perhaps, he wouldn't need to escape. Chapter 129, Raging Flames. Bang! Howl! Gurgle, hit it! Squawk, okay! By the woods. The ground wolf looked miserable. There were already many wounds on its body. After the young man surnamed Deng was attacked by the flaming cloud crow, he didn't dare to be arrogant anymore. After rolling on the ground a few times, he ran into the woods and hid himself. He hid in the bushes and looked at the battle scene in the distance, smacking his lips silently. Too damn strong. Are all the candidates so sick these days? As a member of the surprise attack team, even though Deng Ji did not bother too much about the candidates' sprites, he had looked through their information before. After all. All the sprites of the candidates were entry-level. Reverie Butterfly was the entry-level limit, and there was the word strengthened at the back. This meant that either the sprites themselves were extremely talented, or that they had undergone special training, or swallowed special treasures. As for Flaming Cloud Crow, the information recorded was advanced entry level. What kind of advanced entry level is this? How exactly was the information detailed? Deng Ji cursed in his heart. He couldn't tell anything else. But that eye-catching flaming feather gown was undoubtedly special indeed. How did he train it to do so? What a monster-like candidate! He wanted to retreat. After all, if he continued to stay here, he might be the one getting beaten to death. At this moment, the communicator he was wearing rang. It was his teammate's voice. Xiao Deng, the mission continues. I've already asked for instruction from the higher UPS. We'll take action together to test the standard of the candidate, Su Hao. The Flaming Cloud Crow's flaming feather form can be maintained for 5 minutes at the moment. After 5 minutes, it needs to rest for at least a minute before it can be used again. The duration it can be maintained will be shorter. In his eyes, the ground wolf was stronger than wild sprites like the mountain moving ape. The unique skills that it had mastered included advanced unique skills such as gravity, healing of the earth, and sand blast. Gravity had a lot of restrictions on the two sprites, and was somewhat effective against them. Healing of the earth allowed the ground wolf to constantly absorb the power of the earth every time it stepped on the ground to recover from its injuries, which was how it was able to last so long. And the sand blast. The ground wolf gathered the gravel in the sandstorm and blasted them like grenades. It was a unique skill with strong destructive power. But it couldn't last more than 5 minutes. When the two sprites worked together, it was far better than fighting alone. Amidst the flying sandstorm, Suhao rode the water unicorn beast, with a bubble defense outside to isolate them from the sand. He couldn't see the battle scene. But he calmed his mind and focused, transmitting the weaknesses of the ground wolf to the two sprites. And as the ground wolf was injured, its weaknesses gradually increased. At this moment, Suhao, who had been observing the map on the interface, discovered that something was wrong. Sprites who dare to approach in such a battle. The closest sprite icon was a tyrant bear. He opened it. As expected, it's a sprite with an owner. I knew it, the assessment can't be that simple. Suhao rubbed his head. He had already guessed that the two sprites were here for him. After all, the wild sprites cast on the island posed no threat to him. It changed the experience of the isolated island assessment. It was reasonable to increase its difficulty. He felt that he was being targeted. Of course, he didn't consider escaping as an option. What if he got points deducted from escaping? He shall resent while he could. This is a little troublesome. Tyrant Bear approached. The double gravity field overlapped, making both Reverie Butterfly and Flaming Cloud Crow feel much heavier for a moment. Gurgle. It hated this feeling. Squawk. Flaming Cloud Crow tilted its head and asked. It was asking how to fight. Reverie Butterfly thought for a few seconds and suddenly realized that something was wrong. Wasn't it Suhao's responsibility to consider battle tactics? It pouted. As it dodged, it called out in his heart. Suhao, Suhao, calling out to Suhao. The power of the contract could allow sprites to communicate telepathically with sprite trainers. The closer they got, the better the signal. Suhao received the call. He looked at the sandstorm in front of him that had covered the sky. I can only use that move. At the core area of the island, about a few kilometers away from Suhao. Boom! A purple lightning bolt fell, accurately hitting a giant cannon lobster. Purple thunder arcs bounced on the wounded giant cannon lobster's body, making it almost powerless to move despite already being injured. At this moment, a sprite with a back as sharp as an unsheathed sword stepped forward with its thick and strong limbs, and aggressively pounced onto the giant cannon lobster. It flew straight through air and smashed onto a low-rise building, causing the whole house to collapse. The giant cannon lobster collapsed completely and couldn't get up anymore. Feng Liangke then heaved a sigh of relief. As expected of an elite-level sprite. As long as there's a single mistake in the battle strategy, the best result can only be a narrow victory. Then the gains won't make up for the losses, but now. One of his two sprites was the lightning-winged dragon, the entry-level limit. The other, the sword-back dragon, was inferior in comparison. Even if the teamwork was perfect and the tactics were well thought out, defeating an elite level was still very difficult. Feng Liang felt proud after having won eventually. He thought of his other two strong opponents. Compared to them, my score should be in the lead, right? At another place. Boom! The back tower dragon swayed. It had just been hit by the fiery blaze bull, and the side of the back tower was already charred black. At this moment, the gargoyle hovering in the air suddenly flew down, its sharp claws tearing through the air as it grabbed at the fiery blaze bull that had just displayed charging. Moo! Flames spewed out of the fiery blaze bull's nostrils, sweeping out like a windstorm. However, the gargoyle continued to resist the flames with its sharp claws. A few minutes later, the fiery blaze bull fell, but the back tower dragon and the gargoyle were also covered in wounds. Yu Zhong ran out from behind the big rock he was hiding behind. He rushed speedily to his two sprites and checked their injuries. My injuries are too serious, it's hard to hunt wild sprites later on. His face immediately turned bitter. After finding the badge on the fiery blaze bull, he didn't dare to stay any longer and wanted to leave. Suddenly, the gargoyle let out a low growl. Yu Zhong looked up. In the distance, Flames shot up into the sky, illuminating the sky red. At the same time, at various places in the center of the island, candidates raised their heads one by one, looking at the firestorm that rushed into the sky, their mouths agape. Many members of the surprise attack team who were chasing the candidates also stopped in their tracks. They all pondered. Are any of our sprites fire element? No, who could create such a big commotion? No, I have to go and take a look. Everyone started riding on their sprites and rushed to the scene of the fire. At this moment, at the center of the battlefield, the flaming cloud crow under the flaming feather form continuously threw out flames. With the help of the existing sandstorm and reverie butterfly creating wind, it managed to scatter a large amount of wood element spiritual force. The surrounding trees had been blown down by the wind. Wood made fire. The wind helped make the fire grow bigger. The environment was dry. At 1 o'clock. In an instant, the fire was getting bigger and bigger. With the gushes of strong wind, a firestorm was created, and it was spreading continuously. Amidst the raging flames, the flaming cloud crow's flaming feathers became brighter and brighter. Its flaming feathers extended continuously, like flaming blades that had reached an extreme temperature. Squawk! It let out a loud cry. Its figure split into three. It drew a striking red line in the sea of fire. It's not released tomorrow, it will be released next Friday, important, underlined. Chapter 130, End. Outside the firestorm, the two members of the surprise attack team were dumbfounded. They looked at the continuously spreading and approaching fire, and could only retreat backwards. Waves of heat rushed towards them. Large trees turned into torches, and the burning flames covered the sight of ground wolf and tyrant bear. What exactly is going on inside? They couldn't judge. The slightly younger Deng Zhi looked at the senior. Brother Wang, do we summon? No. Wang Dakai was experienced. He said, summoning can call our sprites back, but it will inevitably expose our location. The two of us can hide, but the two sprites are so big, they can't hide. Besides, he looked at the expanding sea of fire. These flames are only ignited by trees and wood element spiritual force, not unique skills used by fire element sprites. Their destructive power isn't strong. Their sprites were earth element sprites that were good at defense. They had thick skin. It wasn't difficult to last 3 to 5 minutes in such a sea of fire. Wang Dakai's expression was still solemn. But the other party must have his reasons for doing so. We have to understand the situation of the battlefield so that we can make the corresponding plans. He pressed his fingers together and shouted. Sprite commandeering, visual sharing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bright lights, like pointers, appeared clockwise around his index and middle fingers. A sparkling halo wrapped around his finger. Old Wang rubbed his eyes. In an instant, his vision was connected to tyrant bears. He saw the flames that filled the sky, and amidst the sea of fire, the extraordinarily powerful-looking flaming cloud crow that was separated into 3 parts. Even tyrant bear's vision could only capture a red shadow. Its speed was even faster than before. The two sprites were already responding based on their experience. The tyrant bear pressed its palm against the ground, sending soil and rocks flying. Huge stone pillars that looked like bamboo shoots were uprooted from the ground, surrounding them like city walls. It isolated them from the flames. It blocked the flaming cloud crow's vision. But as the red shadow flashed past, the huge stone pillar was cut open like fragile tofu. The ground wolf, which had been continuously attacking using sand blast, was totally incapable of targeting the flaming cloud crow in the sea of fire, for it moved so fast it looked virtually invisible. The gravity field cast by the two sprites couldn't even catch up to the tail flames. This can't go on, I'm going to be dragged to death. It's also impossible to escape the fire field. That flaming cloud crow is eyeing us covetously. And where's the other sprite? Wang Dakai started to feel that something was wrong. Logically speaking, they should have an absolute advantage against two entry-level sprites. Why did it become like this? He thought for less than 2 seconds before ordering Tyrant Bear in his heart. No more uprooting rock columns, just cover your whole body with rock armor, lure the flaming cloud crow to attack, and then create the highest intensity of gravity field, covering your surroundings regardless of friend or foe. It took only less than a second to convey the general meaning of the large paragraph to Tyrant Bear, via connection by contract. Deng Zhi followed Brother Wang's instructions and also gave the ground wolf an order. Double gravity field. Then, use the sand blast to launch a long-range attack in a similar manner that did not distinguish between friend and foe, as it will ensure accuracy of hitting while getting rid of the flaming cloud crow's clone. Finally, use the falling rocks to determine the flaming cloud crow's true location. Displaying his killer move. It was all thanks to Wang Dakai's rich battle experience that he could think so much in an instant. He had encountered a similar situation before. At this moment, the 3 red figures hidden in the sea of fire appeared. A thick layer of rock armor covered Tyrant Bear's body, while the ground wolf lowered its body and hid under the Tyrant Bear's feet. One person, one sprite. It stared intently at the approaching shadow of flames. Under the predicament, it had already reached a high level of concentration. Suddenly, the sky turned dark. It was extremely dark. Just a moment ago, there was a bright fire in front of him, but the next moment, he couldn't even see his own fingers. No, it was so dark as if it was blind. Even Wang Dakai, who shared vision with Tyrant Bear, was extremely uncomfortable. At this moment, a piercing white light suddenly shone. It was like the light of a flashlight shining right at his eyes on a pitch-black night. Ah! Wang Dakai lowered his head and covered his eyes with both hands. Tears flowed uncontrollably from the corners of his eyes. Sprite commandeering, visual sharing could no longer be maintained and was interrupted. Brother Wang, why are you? Little Deng had yet to learn the 4th level sprite commandeering visual sharing and was completely ignorant about the battlefield. He could only listen to Brother Wang's instructions. But before he finished asking, his expression changed. In the contract connection, the ground wolf, which was originally just in a bad state, had already suffered serious injuries at this point. Soon, it became weak again. The sprite's self-protection instinct made it fall unconscious. No matter how much Xiao Deng called, he could not figure out what exactly happened. Old Wang breathed heavily. My Tyrant Bear also. But fortunately, he didn't seem to have killed anyone. Before carrying out the mission, Wang Dakai had never imagined that there would actually be a day when he would be let off by the candidates. His face, which didn't look old, was yet filled with the vicissitudes of life and bitterness. Gurgle. Squawk. Su Hao welcomed the return of the 2 sprites. The condition of Reverie Butterfly was fine. Even though the flaming cloud crow wasn't that injured, it was already very tired. Gurgle. Reverie Butterfly flew up and gave the position of the water unicorn beast's head to the flaming cloud crow. Go tell it, Gurgle. The flaming cloud crow hesitated for a moment before landing on the head of the water unicorn beast. Its feathers tightened as it replied to Big Sister. Squawk. The water unicorn beast wanted to tilt its head, but it didn't dare to. Its head was clearly its own. Cry. Let's go. Su Hao waved. The commotion created was so huge, they couldn't stay any longer. I should have passed my assessment. Previously, Su Hao had seen a drone filming high in the sky. The examiners must have seen his battle. He looked up. He looked for a long time. And gradually fell silent. Where's the drone? Around the fire field, wild sprites observed quietly from afar. Suddenly, they saw figures in the graffiti battlesuit approaching. Like frightened little beasts, they quickly leaped into the bushes or buildings and disappeared without a trace. The 2 members of the surprise attack team approached carefully with their sprites. They looked at the sea of fire, the vague holes, ravines, broken stone pillars, and so on in the flames. They couldn't help but click their tongues. My goodness, what exactly happened here? The boorish man didn't quite understand. Was there a need to create such a huge commotion? Were they trying to kill the candidates? Or were they trying to kill the wild sprites? Someone is putting out the fire, his partner said. The two walked over. He saw the other two members of the surprise attack team. A 5 to 6 meter long alligator was opening its ferocious mouth and spraying out thick water streams that washed the burning trees. The boorish man was just about to say hello. Then, he saw that the expressions of his two colleagues were a little off, as they were filled with disappointment. He took another look. In the distance, a tyrant bear covered in injuries was lying on the ground. A ground wolf with more wounds and an even more miserable appearance laid there, and looked like it was dead. His mind went blank. It took him a few seconds to react. It seemed, perhaps, probably. Those were the sprites of his two colleagues. He was completely stunned. What exactly is going on?